what's more important than anyone else's words and opinions is your own perception of you, which is created through keeping your commitments and your promises. So yeah, if you know who you are, it's hard for someone to tell you who you are or who you are not. So I would say focus on that first. And then if you be a good human being and you do good work in the world, I think naturally people that love you and the work you do will also show up in those moments and raise a spear. Like, I'm here to support this individual.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Hamza Islam, and on each episode of this podcast, I talk to Gen Zers across different industries about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. I created this podcast because I want to know what it's like to be a human being from the guest perspective. While it's easy to talk about all the successes they've had or the work that they are doing or the incredible things that or other incredible things that they're doing, we need to talk about what's behind closed doors in the sense that what it means to be a human being, because sometimes we focus so much on the who we are part, but we don't focus on the what we are part, which is the fact that we are all human beings. And so I hope you guys as listeners join me in learning things from guests that can help us in our personal life, but also more importantly, continuing to emphasize the importance of having an open mind, because we don't know what other people are going through regardless of how much success they've had. So I hope you guys continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible Gen Zers. Now, this week, I am speaking with Sam Demma, who is a best-selling author known for his book, Empty Your Backpack, which is a book about how the beliefs that you carry and the actions you take determine whether you will achieve them. He is also a speaker where he has spoken to over 100 programs across North America, and his keynote presentations have addressed the topics of mental health, leadership, and kindness. I'm really excited to speak to Sam, and just like my last guest, Sam is a huge fan of soccer, so it's always great to connect with someone who loves soccer as well. So Sam Demma, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
Hamza, it is an honor, privilege, and pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for creating this lovely space and inviting me to join.
Yeah, thank you so much. And before we talk about your speaking journey and Empty Your Backpack, we have to talk about soccer because I'm a huge soccer fan. Whenever I get to talk to someone who loves soccer, I just want to know more about what soccer means to them. So I got to ask you, first of all, I know that you wanted to be a professional soccer player, but with injuries happening along the way, it never happened. But I'm curious to know what was your ideal position?
I started my career as a center back, finished as a center defensive midfielder. I had an uncanny ability for long distance running. I actually ran cross country when I was in elementary school. And so I think that position really suited me the best. I loved being the person who was hustling, stopping attacks, distributing the ball, and doing lots of communication. So I think the ideal position would definitely be a center defensive midfield for sure.
That's really interesting. Now, the crazy thing about me was like it felt like every year I was switching positions. So when I was younger, I think it was striker or forward, and then it was midfield, and then it was defense, and then it was goalkeeper. But I think
Wow.
now I feel like I'm best at goalkeeping. The only reason why I don't see myself playing as a goalkeeper is I'm 5'6", which is
Mm.
really, really short for a goalkeeper because most goalies are like 6'3", 6'4". So it's one of those things where if only I was 6'3", but you can't. There's some things you can't control, right?
Yeah, man. You know what's funny though, because one of my favorite athletes of all time was Cannavaro, who was the center defenseman for the Italian national team, and he was like 5'4", 5'5", and everyone was like, you can't play center defense at 5'4", 5'5". Guy won I think he won a trophy for the most goals in one of the World Cups, um, or best defender. And so, hey man, maybe you can be a 5'6" goalie. Don't write yourself out.
Maybe I'll look into it in the future. But what now? Here's the thing about soccer, and I feel like there might be some bias into this because we both love soccer, and I think that there are other sports that can carry the same meaning. But soccer is one of those sports that truly does bring a lot of people together. And if you are a fan of a certain soccer team, it can feel like one really ginormous family because you guys are all sharing the love for one team. I know that soccer, you well, obviously wanted to pursue a professional soccer career, but you've also said that soccer in your personal life has brought the family together. Now, I'm curious to know if there was ever a soccer game, not necessarily that you played, but a soccer game that you watched that you felt like truly brought the family together. I would say growing up, I mean, I'm someone from the United States. I know you're from Canada, but watching like Columbus Crew, which is a soccer team in the in where I'm from, watching them every game or watching them every week almost, it brought me, my dad together. My mom's not a big fan of the team. She's one of those people that just loves Messi wherever he goes. But it was one of those things where it brought me and my dad together because we've had a love for our hometown team. A lot of people would support Real Madrid, Barcelona, or some of the other best teams in the world, but we were like, no, we want to support our hometown team, and it brought us together. So it almost felt like every Columbus Crew game, it was just like that's because of that experience. It brought me and my dad and friends and other people together. For you, was there a soccer game growing that you watched, or a team that you watched that truly brought the family together?
There's one vivid memory of the 2006 World Cup, Italy versus France in shootouts. And we had our cousins, aunts, and uncles all over at the house watching this game. And because it went into penalty shootouts, we were running late to go to our uncle's kid's birthday party, which was a 45-minute drive from the house. So we ended up showing up late, but they didn't care because they were sitting on their couch at their house watching the game too. So I think that game in and of itself was one of the most unifying experiences where all family members and extended family members were watching or even in the same house. Um, and I'm talking squished on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, screaming at every single shot. And, those unified silent moments between each shot or when the players are walking up to the penalty spot. Um, I'll say that was the game. And then the team that's brought my family together the most is definitely like any national team, whether it's Canada, Italy, or Greece, which is my other uh, part of my ethnicity.
That's really cool. And I know these are sometimes weird questions to ask because, like, you think that sports is just a form of entertainment, which is true. But then as you kind of dive or spend more time with the sport, there's like a sense of unity in some way. I would say my parents are a bit weird with this when it comes to supporting national teams because we're all over the place. So I'll
Yeah.
support for United States and then any Muslim country. My dad's more Netherlands, other Muslim countries, and then my mom is just Argentina. So you can imagine how happy she was when Argentina won the World Cup. And then the nightmare for the next 2 or 3 days because she would send me so many Messi like videos where it's like, Messi failed this, Messi did this, or he couldn't do this, but he did this, and I'm like, oh man, this is a nightmare. But I don't know. In a way, I'm glad that my mom is happy to see her favorite team win. I don't know if she knows anything about Argentina, but it's all good. But but I am curious to know though because you obviously wanted to pursue a professional soccer career before going into speaking. Was there a specific reason as to why you wanted to pursue professional soccer, a soccer player dream? Because growing up, the main reason why I wanted to do it was to one day play for my hometown team, the Columbus Crew. I always feel like even though I retired at 13, there was always this case where whenever I'm at their home stadium and someone's injured, I'm like, I'm ready, Dad. I have the jersey, I've got the pants, I'm ready to go. I still have that even at 22. Was there a reason as to why you wanted to pursue this?
I fell in love with the game. I didn't necessarily fall in love with one team. I just didn't envision an existence where I wasn't playing soccer for the rest of my life when I was growing up. I think it was a combination of playing it so much, watching it so much, hearing about it so much that I genuinely fell in love with the sport. Um, it's all I thought about. Every decision I made was based on that dream and that goal, from not going to parties growing up to not having a girlfriend to throwing out the cookies in the pantry, uh, to finessing some people on Facebook Marketplace to get gym equipment and buying and selling stuff so I could work out in my home. Like I just loved the game. Um, I had a team that I loved, Juventus, but I would have enjoyed playing professionally for anybody.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm one of those people like I don't like I'll have a European team to support for, but at the end of the day, it's like my hometown team, and I'm gonna be with them through the good and the bad. So we're
Nice.
having a great season, but I like it was just all about representing the hometown team. Like I would always say, like that's my Real Madrid or Barcelona. You guys
Yeah,
might have like that team, but that's a team I'll support no matter what. So,
I love that.
but I I want to now transition into the person that you are today because even though the soccer career unfortunately didn't work out, your speaking and your dedication to service has worked out, and it's congratulations on on all the success you've had. I want to know though, one of my favorite, or not necessarily one of my favorite commercials, but as someone who loves watching, I mean, someone who watches TV a lot, I'll always see these commercials about some sort of medicine where it's like, before this you look like this, and then you take the medicine and you go, after taking this is what I look like. And as someone who's been involved in service for a very long time, I would love to ask you if you could give me a before and after of who Sam Demma was slash is once getting involved in service. Tell me a bit of who you were before being involved in service, or like I guess like the type of person, and then tell me the type of person you feel like you've become now that you've obviously been into this field of service and speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I'll share, I believe the way that we do one thing is the way we do everything. That our energy, our integrity, our character traits speak before our words and actions ever do. So I think it is no surprise that very quickly I picked up a new skill outside of sports and pursued it with all my might, passion, effort, and energy, because that's what I was doing with soccer before I, made the transition after high school. Um, some differences growing up in school, all I did was play soccer to the point where I didn't join any extracurricular activities, any school clubs. I didn't have many other events going on outside of soccer practice, soccer games, and tournaments. After I stopped playing sports, I got involved in so many clubs and activities. I started volunteering. I started going to Toastmasters, which was a public speaking group. I joined an association called the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. I served on their board for 2 years, volunteering, putting together programming for all the speakers for our monthly events. I started doing more traveling to see the world and have new experiences. I got a job for the first time at the keg, waiting tables and bussing tables and being a host. So I would say my essence of who I am as a human being has not changed. When I was an athlete, I was the student on my team who stopped other teammates from cutting corners during fitness practice because I wanted to be a good example. I wanted to motivate and inspire people. Now, instead of me doing that on a field, I stand on a stage in front of human beings and share ideas that I think are going to inspire, motivate, and help them in their lives. So I think the energy and essence is very similar, but the events in my life and what my calendar looked like is definitely very different. Um, and the only other difference I would say is that as an athlete, my main focus was me. It's like, I need to improve. I need to score a goal. I need to get stronger. I need to get faster. Now, I still have a focus on personal development now, but the real reason I'm working so hard on myself is because I have this burning passion to serve others. And if I improve, how can I provide value to the world? And if we wake up every single day and ask ourselves, how can I provide value to others? It's inevitable that you're going to improve yourself because the more valuable you become, the more value you can provide. Um, so I think that mental shift has been a really big one after I stopped playing sports.
I want to touch on the mental shift part because I think one of the most difficult questions I think we can ask ourselves, regardless of how far we are into our journey as to what we are doing, is how do we know if we made the right choice in choosing something? And now here's the thing, because you've obviously done this for a long time. People have talked about how incredible you are as a person and the things that you have spoken about, but it almost feels like in a way that all of this could go away in one day or whatever that may be. So even then, like how did you know that when it came to going into this idea of service and leadership and and speaking, how you knew that was the right decision for you? Especially like because even if we were to go early on in your career when maybe people didn't know who Sam Demma was, and the only people that knew you were yourself and a close few friends. that can be the most difficult journey where it's like, no one knows me, I'm failing. How did you know even then that that was the right decision for you?
I got turned down 970 times in my first year trying to pitch speaking to schools. Only 30 people said yes. I had thousands of conversations. Um, the answer is I didn't know it was going to be the right choice. If we knew before making a decision that it was going to work out, it would defeat the whole purpose of making the decision in the first place. Um, I believe that our lives are not predetermined. Personally, I believe we have free will. I think we have different skill sets, but that ability to make a choice um, is a unique gift that I think we all have. And I think what makes a choice right is not the actual choice itself, but it's what we do after it. And of course, there are some choices that are inherently wrong um, because they have consequences that we can't reverse. But when it comes to passions and pathways, saying that a choice is right would assume that there's only one predetermined pathway for your life. And I don't think there is. Um, and so, yeah, transparently, I didn't know if it was going to be the right choice. What I did know is that it was the choice that felt right the most to me. Um, in my heart, in my head, in my gut, something was pulling me in this direction. And although for others it didn't make any sense, who would probably pay me money to stop talking, uh, for me, something in my heart and in my gut said, Sam, you need to do this. And I followed that feeling. And I've made so many decisions based on that same experience. And it's never really let me down. And I think the reason it hasn't let me down is because after I make the choice, I ask myself, what do I need to do to make this a success in my mind? Who are the people I need to meet? What are the resources I need to consume? The programs I need to purchase? The places I need to travel to? Like, what are the books I need to read? And you set yourself up in a way that it's almost impossible to fail at that thing. And the funny thing is that people will assume it was the right choice only after you succeeded. I disagree. I believe it's the right choice if it feels right to you, and you're being honest with your intuitive feelings.
Yeah, I love how you I love how you kind of made it at first you turned it into like a philosophical conversation when you were talking about free will. I'm just like because it's funny because I'm learning like I'm one of my favorite YouTube channels is Crash Course with Hank Green and I forget John Green, yeah, and one of the topics in Crash Course is philosophy and it's like determinism versus free will or something like that.
Mm,
So I'm just like that was kind of funny, but no, I love what you said because at the end of the day it's you're doing it because you think it's right and it's like from it's your personal intention. Now that's actually how I want to transition to the next conversation because here's the thing and it's funny because one day I put on my Instagram poll what is more scarier, the idea of asking people or asking someone for help or the idea of helping someone, because it's like you're in a place to help people or you might be in a place where you're vulnerable and you want to help other or and you need help from other people but you're worried about being a burden anyway. And it's interesting because a majority of people said they are more scared of asking for help than helping someone. So that was just an interesting fact that I saw on my Instagram poll. But as someone who's dedicated their life to service, I want to ask you, I guess, like maybe two questions. They're not really the same thing, but I would love to know your thoughts, which is what would you say is the hardest thing about helping people? Or if that's not the better question, what is the scariest thing about helping people? Because, for me, I overthink a lot. And if you were to ask my mom, like, what type of person of Hamza Islam? She's like, overthinker, like nonstop. So for you, I want to ask you, like, and the reason why I say that is like, even when I'm helping people, I overthink a lot. So when you're helping people or educating people about the importance of service, what would you say is the hardest or the scariest thing about kind of talking about the importance of that or helping people?
yeah, great question. And the hardest thing about helping people, in my experience to this day, is not having enough time and energy to help everybody. Um, in the work that I do, I will travel and I'll stand in front of a room of 1,000 people, and I do that like 180 times a year. Like last year, I had 180 events, and the sheer amount of people who need some support or are struggling blows your mind, man. Um, And I don't have the time or capacity to assist every single one of those individuals in need of support and service. So the hardest part for me has been understanding that I can't be the direct support for 200,000 humans. But what I can be is the person who connects them to somebody who can support them from their local community. So the hardest thing for me was understanding that and letting go and saying, how can I help this person the most? Because my ego wants me to be the person that supports them all the time, answers their DMs, helps them and supports them throughout their journey. Because I want to say, look at me, look at this person that I individually helped. Whereas the more helpful solution would be connecting them with someone who actually lives in their local community, who they can talk to on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and truly support them face to face. So for me, that was probably one of the most difficult things. I remember early in my career, literally receiving DMs from students who were severely struggling with their mental health. Um, and it kept me up until like 4 in the morning, answering dozens of different DMs nonstop, almost having like crisis conversations with people that live across the globe because they heard me speak on stage. And it was actually destroying my mental health. And in all honesty, it wasn't supporting theirs either because I wasn't there on the ground able to support them or give them the attention and time they needed. Um, I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, understanding that I don't have to be the person who individually supports each individual, and I can make a greater contribution by being the connector to other supports, that was probably the hardest thing for me to learn when it came to supporting people.
And first of all, I just want to say that you definitely answered my question. And I think what makes it hard is that, I think you've said this in many podcast interviews, and obviously it's very cliche. You're not the only person that said this. I mean, there's so many people that'll say this where a yes to something means a no to something else, right? And so when it comes to helping people, and obviously mental health activists will say this a lot, which is that if you can't help yourself, how on earth are you able to help other people? It's because, and it's weird because sometimes we don't count ourselves as human beings. Because like, if like, it's so weird for me to say, oh, I'm going to talk to myself or I'm going to spend time with myself, because people look at you as a bit weird or creepy or like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you are the best version of you so that you can be the best version of yourselves. I want to know though, I guess like the idea of like spending or looking after yourself, because I know that's something that you also, I mean, I know you talked about it just recently, but it's something that you're very passionate about. Tell me a bit about how often you spend time with yourself, which I know that I feel like that question came out wrong on so many levels, but I think the thing is that like, for me, one of the reasons why I started the podcast was because I spent a lot of time by myself. I remember senior year of high school, I used to or eat lunch by myself, which used to feel like an embarrassment. But now looking back, it's actually not as bad as I thought because I found ways to entertain myself without needing other people. And so I don't know, I feel like spending time with yourself really allows you to know who you are as a person. Whereas when you're spending time with other people, it feels like you want other people to figure out who you are. So tell me a bit about like, I guess the relationship you have with yourself. I know that question came out wrong, but please don't make it. I hope you don't take it the wrong way.
No, man, I didn't take it in that context at all. I spent a lot of time alone. For me, most of the year I'm traveling. So empty hotel rooms, airplanes, airports, hundreds of hours per year. I probably spend more time alone than I do around family or other human beings at this point in my career. So I would say I have a great relationship with my independence and myself. I journal a ton. Every morning I ask myself, what did I do yesterday that I don't want to do today or don't want to continue doing today? Or what did I do yesterday that I do want to continue into today? And it's a constant checkup on myself and the choices I'm choosing to make. Before I go to sleep, I journal about my entire day. I spend between 10 and 20 minutes in meditation each morning after working out at the gym in silence with myself. I do go to the gym early morning around 5:30, 5:45 every day. That's also by myself. I'm not training with other friends or family. Um, so yeah, I spend copious amounts of time enjoying company with myself and traveling and reflecting, and it's it's changed my life. Um, when I look at periods in my life where I've let go of the habit of reflection, and spending time alone or journaling and meditating versus the times in my life where those things have been daily pillars that are non-negotiable, I noticed a tangible difference, not only in my results when it comes to my work, but also in just my overall happiness and how I feel.
I want to switch gears and kind of bring back the concept of, well, not just soccer, but in sports in general. And I think a lot of athletes will say that they've learned more from their losses than their wins. Now, I want to bring that idea back because one of my favorite questions to ask people is like, what are some of the worst days that they're grateful for? Because when it comes to gratefulness, and I learned it from another activist I had on the podcast, where it's like you can be grateful for the good things in your life, but you can also, in a weird way, be grateful for the unfortunate or the bad things. And I want to tie that into service. So I know it's such a weird question, but I think it's still an important question. And it's similar to how I asked you about what's the hardest thing or the scariest thing about helping people. And I feel like you've answered it, but maybe, and if the answer's still the same, I can cut it. But tell me a time where helping someone went terribly wrong. And now here's the thing. I don't mean like, let's say like if I'm bleeding, Sam, I'm not saying like Sam's like, screw you, Hamza, you can bleed to death. I'm not talking about that. Not talking about that. But it's the sense of like you had good intentions, but it failed miserably. But here you are today, and you can look back and say, I feel bad that I was trying to help this person at the time. It didn't go well, but in a really, really, really weird way, I'm grateful that I went through this experience, because if I didn't go through this experience, I wouldn't be the type of person I am today. I feel like you've already answered this question, but we can obviously cut it if the answer's still the same.
No, you're asking for a specific scenario of a time in my life where I attempted to support or help somebody, and the way it unfolded was not my intention, and it turned out a little differently, and how I'm grateful for it today. And I can give you a perfect example. There is an individual who I was very close friends with, that I involved in a project, because I really wanted to have him be a part of it. Um, and I thought that I was being of service and support to him by including him in the project. Um, the way things unfolded after that decision were not great. I learned a lot from the experience. Um, Most of it was a result of my own choices and actions, not theirs, which made it an even greater learning experience for me. And actually, recently, I filmed this individual a video just to reflect on it and apologize for a few things, and share some lessons learned. And they responded back, and I think we're on good terms again. But I learned some lessons that through that experience I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Um, and yeah, immediately when you were saying that, that was the first situation that came to mind.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it's one of those things where I always go back to this, which is the fact that it's your intention is good. And I think that's hard because people will obviously judge you, or they'll come to conclusions based on what they see on the outside. But what we don't normally see is what's going on inside. And we're trying to do good, but I think the idea of trying to do good is not as easy as it sounds. Again, I feel like that's a philosophical thing, but that's a whole nother conversation. I want to I know you are obviously a very busy person, and I know you have a tour coming up, but a few questions before I let you go. Firstly, one of my favorite things about social media, even though I don't like it because it's like people often say social media is a highlight reel as opposed to the full picture. I've noticed that whenever I see your content, there's always at least one person that will comment, that will say a negative thing about you. I forget which one I saw recently, but there was one where it was like, "Oh, Sam, all you're doing is just speaking. You're not really doing anything." And then the really cool thing was that there were like a bunch of people that were supporting you on Instagram, and I was like, I really want to know. I want to dive into this. So I know sometimes, and it's weird because obviously, empty your backpack is the importance of not letting negative thoughts get into us. But I am curious to know, what would you say was the best negative comment you've received? I know we usually don't like these, but at the same time, sometimes negative comments can, in a way, make us become a better person. It's weird, but it can sometimes happen.
So recently, I've been posting lots of funny dance videos. One dance I created is called the Riz Walk. Maybe you've seen it online. It's currently getting me a ton of engagement, which is helpful because I'm using it strategically. I'll post a funny dance video followed by a couple posts of really important content. And I noticed that when I do that, the engagement, the views, the sharing, the commenting is amplified tenfold. And so I've continued to post these funny dance videos. Two of them have recently almost hit 2 million views and 70,000 shares and hundreds of comments. 90% of which are extremely negative if you go read the comment sections. And it's funny because empty your backpack is a concept and idea that I came up with and I'm sharing with the world about the importance of not allowing other people's words and opinions to weigh you down. Yet there are moments where I'm reading my own comments and they trigger me. And I'm the messenger, And sometimes we need the message most that we deliver to other people ourselves. And there's been hundreds of comments that have not triggered me at all. The ones that have triggered me in some way, I believe, are trying to teach me something about myself. For example, recently I received a comment, and the comment verbatim said, "You are pathetic. There is not anything that you do that requires any talent." And I clicked on this person's profile and noticed that they were from my hometown, went to a high school next to mine, and we had 4 mutual connections. Right away, my heart started racing. Like, whoa, it's so different when it's a random person in one of the states or across the globe than it is when it's a local individual that you have mutual connections with that goes to the high school next to yours. So I felt this urge to jump in and respond, and we ended up having an entire conversation. I was extremely respectful the entire time. I actually took screenshots of all of it to use it potentially as an example in the future. And I woke up the next morning and he had deleted all of his comments. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And what I think these experiences are trying to teach me is to build that capacity, to build that ability to not allow other people's negative words and opinions to weigh on your shoulders. It's easy to say it. It's a lot harder to practice. How do you practice? In those situations, you take a deep breath. Now here's what I do. I take a deep breath when I see the comment and I ask myself, is this criticism or is it hate? And if I can't see any piece of feedback or opinion that will help me improve my abilities, it's pure hate. Pure hate, I believe, comes from a place of jealousy, envy, or suffering. And so those people, I politely, quietly wish them well. Whereas if someone shares an opinion that has some thought behind it that may actually inform me or help me improve or have a cool conversation, I will put my ego aside, take a deep breath, and engage and share my perspectives and opinions in the hope that we can strengthen each other's opinions or shift our opinions in some positive way. Yeah, I would say that was one comment that really shook me. And then there's a couple other ones. There's hundreds, but there's one other one that jumps in my mind right away. One student said, schools hire this guy and then say that it stops bullying. Because everyone in the DMs is making fun of me. They're all making these jokes about my walk, my dance move. But yeah, man, I might have to make a reactions video just because of this question. So stay tuned.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I can't dance to save my life, so I'll just leave it at that. Now, I know at the end of the day, you've obviously made it an emphasis in the fact that you cannot let the negative comments get the best of you, but knowing that you also you always get support from other people saying like, hey, what Sam's doing is really good. Does that add any sort of security, or do you feel like at the end of the day, regardless of the positive or negative comments, it's like it's up to you as to how you want to react to them?
Yeah, I think speaking about security, the thing that adds that reassurance of self is keeping your personal commitments. For me personally, I know who I am because I say what I'm going to do and then I do that thing. So I am someone who follows through on my promises to myself, which makes me feel good about myself. So then when someone else enters my space and tries to tell me who I am, pathetic and someone who has no talent, or a stupid idiot who keeps showing up on my For You page, those words are a lot harder to change my perception of myself because I've already created who I am and I'm living it out every single day. So I would say the supportive words of others, like other students commenting, is very nice and it's very helpful and it's very reassuring. But what's more important than anyone else's words and opinions is your own perception of you, which is created through keeping your commitments and your promises. So yeah, if you know who you are, it's hard for someone to tell you who you are or who you are not. Um, so I would say focus on that first. And then if you be a good human being and you do good work in the world, I think naturally people that love you and the work you do will also show up in those moments and raise a spear and be like, I'm here to support this individual.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, people don't know who you are, you know who you are. And yeah,
Yeah.
that sounded so philosophical and psychological at the same time, but
Well,
it's
that's
weird.
the
I am
thing though, right? It's like, especially on social media, I have to remind myself, this person doesn't live with me. They've never talked to me. They've never met me. They haven't seen my performance. They've only seen a 6-second silly dance video on social media. I'm going to allow their comment to change the way I see myself when they know nothing about my entire 24 years of life? Crazy.
what I will say, so I am not a philosophy major, nor am I a psychology major. I'm actually more of a computer science major, well, informational systems to be exact. But one thing I would say, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this, which is, I think at the end of the day, you can only know. Like, I could talk to Sam every day for the rest of my life, but at the end of the day, I feel like I will only know 50% of you, meaning like, okay, I'll understand like who Sam is on the outside, but I will never understand you fully because there's like the outward version of Sam, and then there's like the Sam that we don't know, like the mental stuff. So I don't know. I would say like, the thing is, we will never truly know what like who a person. No, yeah, we will never truly know what a person is because at best we may know 50%, unless we can somehow figure out a way to like see what they're thinking. Which I hope that's kind of creepy, but you get what I mean. Like, we will never truly know you because at best we can only know like 50%, and that's based off what we see on the outside.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's almost impossible to figure out who somebody is. Um, which is another reason why I think we have to stop being so quick to judge and drop comments. So I appreciate you sharing that. I agree.
For sure. Now, I mentioned in the introduction how some of the most common topics you have talked about are mental health, leadership, and kindness. And I guess in a way they all have their similarities. Like, if we were to draw a Venn diagram, we could see the commonality of the three. But I am curious to know if there's one topic that you feel like has been the most difficult to talk about or to, I guess, inspire people. And here's why I say that. So when I was thinking about this question, and I looked at what's more difficult talking about, mental health, leadership, or kindness, I thought kindness was the most difficult to talk about, only because I feel like of the three words, kindness is more of like a term you've learned. Kindness is a term you've learned since you were like a child. And so I feel like there's like this child notion where it's like, if you talk about kindness, then it's like, do you guys not know that we are adults, or we're much older than 5 or 6 year olds? Because kindness is a term we've learned when we're like really, really little, whereas leadership and mental health may be a few years older. So I guess I mean, I don't know, that's just me from the outside. I'm not hating on you or
Yeah.
anything, but from you, like, which one of these topics do you feel like is the most difficult to talk about?
Yeah, that's a good question. At this point in my life, I don't feel like talking about any of the three topics is any more or less difficult. They're all equal parts of my life. Um, I think in terms of audience reception or perception or expectations, they probably believe and think the same thing you do around kindness. That it's this cliche word. And it's funny because I go through my life and I'll ask myself, you know, was that person like pretty disrespectful to me just now, or am I dreaming? And it happens often. And the funny thing is that most of the people in those situations are full-grown adults. Um, and so I think there's an opportunity to learn in every moment if we are open to learning. And so I think helping people understand that is probably the most challenging and difficult thing to do, especially when they read a bio on a website or a couple words like kindness, mental health, or leadership. They already assume what they're going to receive or hear. So I would say trying to help other people maintain an open mind before those types of experiences is what's most difficult in my line of work.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think all three can be difficult because we are living in a time where mental health is talked about a lot. Leadership is another interesting topic that is talked about and is often, it feels like it's easy because it's like uplift people or inspire people, but it's much more easier said than done. And then obviously the fact that if you try telling people, hey guys, we need to be kind with one another, it's like, I'm much older than 5 or 6 years old, right? Like I
Yeah.
am 20 years old or I'm 16. And so, yeah, there's definitely cliche. I think there's a stigma on all three, but I totally get where you're coming from. And I guess it definitely depends on someone's perspective.
I'll
Now,
say this as well. I'll
yeah,
say
go
this as
ahead.
well, real quick. The other thing that makes any of them difficult to talk about is when I'm not practicing them in my own life. If I fall out of alignment and I stop taking care of my mental well-being, if I fall out of alignment with my own self-leadership, I stop keeping my promises. If I fall out of alignment in following the golden rule and treating people with kindness and respect, who am I to stand on a stage and speak about it? And I'm not perfect. There's moments in my life where I've made terrible decisions, and I go on stage and talk about making great ones. Every human being does. Every human being makes mistakes. Um, in those moments, when I'm not living what I preach, those certain topics become extremely challenging to talk about. Um, so I will give that perspective. I think it's helpful to hear.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I say on the podcast, which is the fact that we have to remember that we are also a human being. Like I'm not, and like when I say we, I mean like Sam Demma needs to remember that Sam Demma is a human being. And sometimes we don't count ourselves, but we need to because we exist. And if we can't help ourselves, who is going to help us, right? So I do appreciate what you said. Now, my last question before my signature question, which I'm thinking about asking lately, before I get to that, I know you're going on tour later, or you're going on tour, and by the time this episode comes out, you're going to Kenya, which I know you're usually in North America and obviously in parts of Canada because that's where you currently reside. But now you're going to Kenya. Tell me one thing that you're excited about when it comes to going to Kenya, and then one thing you are nervous about. I don't know if you've ever been there. I haven't, so I'm just curious to know, like when you're going to, I guess, like a new country, assuming you've never been there. Tell me one thing you're excited and one thing you're nervous about.
I've never been to Kenya. I am very excited. One thing I am excited about doing is playing soccer with locals. Um, One thing I am very nervous about is how the food will affect my belly. Um, and there's a couple other things I'm nervous about too, like access to my phone to talk to my parents and the time change to all the medications I'm taking. I had to get a bunch of shots and take malaria pills, so I'm a little worried about health stuff. Um, the language barrier. I want to make sure people understand what I'm saying. Those are a few of the things on my mind. But I'm super excited. I'm also excited about spending time in Tanzania with my friend Zian after the tour is done for a week. His family has insisted we have a local experience with him and his parents. They're gonna take us to Zanzibar and we're gonna do a safari. So there's lots to look forward to and be excited about as well.
I can relate to you with the belly part. So my parents are from Bangladesh, which is
Yep.
I still have to tell people even nowadays that we are a separate country. We're not in India.
Right.
But yeah, I totally understand the belly part because when I went there back in 2022, my parents will say things like don't drink tap water. You don't know where that's coming from. Or sometimes like, as someone who loves eating chicken curry, I sometimes can't eat chicken curry. And it's like it's so hard because you're looking at it and you're like, that's my thing. But I totally get it from the, and it's because there are certain parts of the world where it's an unfortunate issue and it's a slippery slope to go through. So yeah, but I wish you the best of luck in Kenya and hope you have a great experience playing soccer. And obviously, I've interviewed Dion before, so hopefully you guys have a great time. Now, my last question, and well, I've had a lot of traditional signature questions. They've succeeded and failed, but one thing I've been noticing recently is that regardless of all the success you've had, there's obviously the Sam or other. There's always a different side of the picture, knowing that there are certain challenges and experiences that you go through that you probably don't talk about enough, or the fact that, yeah, you see 1% of me, but there's a 99% that you don't see. Currently, right now, I love how I just said the same thing, but currently, what would you say is the hardest thing about being Sam Demma?
Figuring out the next step. I've been speaking in schools for the past 6 years, and I love the work, and I will continue doing it in some capacity for the rest of my life. Though my heart and that intuition that I was talking about earlier is starting to brew in my belly and say, hey man, there's something else. And I haven't fully figured out what the something else is yet. So I'm in this stage of exploring and trying new things. And to do so means carving out space on my calendar for nothing, to explore, to wander, to have fun, and saying no to things that I would have said yes to a few months ago or a year ago that helped me grow my business and have a greater impact. Like saying no to those things now is really challenging. I'm having a really hard time doing that. And because a part of the vision is slightly unclear just now, with this new feeling in my gut that's calling me to something else, I struggle a little bit at certain times. Why am I doing this? Why am I showing up? What's the next step? What's next? And it's real. I've started taking acting classes and I'm about to do stand-up comedy and like venture into some other arenas that I've never ventured in before. And I'm putting on this beginner cap, and it's tough at times. So I would say that's one thing that no one else really knows about right now, that I'm going through a little bit of a transition, trying to figure out what the next step is while I continue to do this work in different capacities. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. It was good reflection.
Yeah, of course. And I know that you are doing a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you're doing a lot of good for not only others, but for yourself. And so I just want to say, Sam, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Thank you for all the incredible things or all the incredible messages you have given on not just with speaking, but also being able to share them on social media. I wish you the best of luck in Kenya and obviously in the future. And I hope we get to meet in person. Hopefully, maybe we can watch a soccer game in Columbus, Ohio. I will warn you though, if you do show up in a Toronto FC jersey, we may need to have a conversation because we consider them a big rival. But nevertheless, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Hamza, keep up the great work. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.